Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I'm here with Bodine Victoria. Heralded as one of the most consistent hitmakers in the local music business, Bodine Victoria has turned her gift for communication into a successful, multifaceted business. An actress, an entertainer, presenter, and entrepreneur with 20 years of broadcast experience, she produces the YouTube series BodinePot and showcases the islands of the Bahamas through the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas show on ZNS's fabulous Living Bahamian Style lifestyle television series. She performs on the largest national and regional stages, having opened for Patrice Roberts, Bunji Garlin, Kymani Marley, and many more. Bodine Victoria's music is steeped in culture with futuristic elements. A true Renaissance woman, Bodine Victoria Johnson is committed to the culture of education, entrepreneurship, and entertainment. Welcome to Speaking Tongues, Bodine. How are you today?
Hi, Elle. I am amazing. And thank you so much for having me. It's really a blessing and a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me. And I'm so excited to talk to you. I'm a fan of your music. I'm a fan of your food. So I'm ready to kick off this conversation and get to know a little bit more of your story. I like to start each episode with the same question, which is what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
My first language is English, is actually Bahamian Creole. Let's call it that. I delved a bit into Spanish, although my sister has more of a passion for it. So I can interpret, I can listen, but to speak it fluently, it really is not something that I do
Mm,
extremely well. So gonna work on it. And then I'm trying to learn some Haitian Creole as well, simply because, well, obvious reasons. Here in the Bahamas, we have a really large Haitian population, and their community is just so rich and like steeped in culture. I feel like it would be a sign of honor and respect just to learn a bit more about how to communicate in Haitian Creole as well. So I'm not a polyglot per se, but most certainly I absolutely love languages.
that's amazing. I only recently found out that there's such a Haitian community growing in the Bahamas. And as you're moving around Nassau, let's say, do you hear a lot of Creole spoken on the streets or at events and things like that?
Yeah, so in terms of Haitian Creole, I worked for like 17 years as an English teacher and religious studies teacher in the Bahamian government school system. And I started out teaching religious studies, and then I moved into language arts and literature. And so you come across students who have recently come to the country and they know only Haitian Creole as their first language. And so you have to find ways to speak with them and to teach them. And that kind of made me want to learn a bit more about Haitian Creole. And of course, you go out to certain places like the fish fry, just like anywhere you go to see any community of people or where any large group of people would be, you would hear them speaking in the languages that are most commonly used for them, their first languages, when they want to talk to one another. Give a few little jokey jokes. They do that. When they want to give important messages, they do that. So you hear it. And I think the important thing is to respect and understand and appreciate that people are going to communicate. I hear the Cubans and the Filipinos and, the Indians, they all speak in their languages, in their communities, or in their family gatherings. And I just believe it's such a beautiful thing to experience.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I love that. I love that. And I think and I'm glad you're talking about that because I don't think that a lot of people outside of the Bahamas would really think of this multilingual communities that exist there. So it's
Mhm.
wonderful to get that perspective and get that understanding of how we're using languages in the Bahamas. This is
Also, if you're going to be around people and you genuinely love people,
mhm.
then you are going to interact with them regardless of what language they speak. And we tend to find out that between Bahamian Creole and Haitian Creole, and then we also have, let's say, the Greek population. I recently learned conch is a Greek thing. Like crack conch is a Greek food, Greek inspired food, a Greek food of Greek origin.
Mhm.
We tend to have so much of our culture kind of intermeshed with one of them. And so hearing the word spoken allow for us to understand the etymology of or the origin of certain things that we hold close culturally to ourselves. And it kind of dispels the erasure of how much of a melting pot so many different people contributed to that melting pot. Like we have a melting pot and people put things in there that we call Bahamian, although they didn't start with the Tinos and the Arawaks. They definitely were contributed to by people from many places. And
Right.
I absolutely love that.
You said that crack conch is Greek in origin. We are going to come back to that. So I just
Um,
wanted to make a note. But let's talk about Bahamian Creole. Let's talk about, from your perspective, how does it differ from standard English, or how does it differ from other Caribbean Creoles? And what to you makes it specifically stand out in the Caribbean, makes it specifically Bahamian?
you know what? We have a lot of persons that have done a whole lot of work that really gives us a good footing for understanding that the way that Bahamians speak is not a dialect, it's an actual Creole language.
Right.
And it speaks to the African origins of this Creole language. The way that we repeat phrases, morning, 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 the way that we kind of cut sometimes syllables short. We tend to really express ourselves in a way that is very unique, but also kind of similar to some of the things that you hear from countries like Trinidad or countries like Barbados, and even to some degree Jamaica. So we tend to say and do things in a way that pays homage to our African heritage. We speak in shortened syllables. We speak sometimes in I'm trying to kind of express it because I'm so excited about it. When we talk to one, I'm gonna just slip into the dialect now
Go
for
for
those
it.
that don't know. So sometimes when we talk, people really think that, and it's not that, it's that. Okay? It's not here, it's here. It's not this, it's this. And we tend to, kind of move the TH and we make it a D. We tend to kind of drop the W, what. And it's so funny to hear when Bahamians are trying to speak British. Because when you jump on British English, jump on Bahamas Air and you hear good morning. And we are now in Nassau. What is Nassau? It's the AUR because they're trying to be proper. And so people that grew up in like the 40s and the 50s and they went to grammar schools or grammar classes, they were taught the British Standard English. And what ended up happening is the Bahamian Creole became a sign of protest. It was also looked at as a lowbrow, broken English that was not respected.
Hmm.
And I'm so happy that we have brands and we have people that have truly embraced the reclamation of this dialect. So you have, let's say, a Telsine Turner in her play Woman Take Two. She makes sure that that dialect is used. And you have a Patricia Glinton McCollis who, through her literary works, An Evening in Guanima, intentionally expresses the power of Bahamian dialect in the storytelling aspects. And so that you have things that people only from Andros in the Bahamas would say, things that people only from Bimini would say. And I ain't even gonna start on Bryland because of all the people, I love me some Bryland people, but of all the people from Lutra is really talking, you really scringe. It's be really screen, oops. And so to know and to love the origin of the language and the way that we uniquely express ourselves, excitement, sadness, um, trapsiness, oh child, the trapsiness, and just to be able to appreciate that repetition of words to exaggerate it is a very African thing. It's something that makes us proud. I want to say a very special hello to Cache Knowles from Eyes of the Bahamian Bay. Yeah, that's my girl. Building a brand off of the reclamation of Bahamian culture and teaching people what it is, especially young people, what it is to speak in Bahamianese.
Mhm. I love that. And Cachet was a guest on Speaking Tongues in our first year on
Mhm.
of this podcast. And as you said that about people from Eleuthera, Cachet's from Eleuthera, and I
Yeah.
remember my family's from Eleuthera as well, like originally.
Mhm.
And listening to her brought me way back. Just wow, I haven't heard this cadence of speaking, and I haven't heard her it just brought back so many good memories just listening to her, and I just love the versatility and the differences in Bahamian voices. And since you brought up Eleuthera and Andros, when you're moving through the country, island to island, north to south, east to west, how do you notice that we are speaking differently?
You know what? I think that each island has its own dialect, and then each settlement has its own dialect, because we have to remember that you have different communities of people that settled in different places. For example, in Andros, you have a group of Indians that live there, and so you can go to their settlement, and the dialect there, or the Bahamian Creole there, is a bit different from the ones that you would find in like Lothar Andros, or the ones that you would find in Mangrove Heath. And so you tend to know where people are from based on the way that they speak. The same way, you know, some people in London would have like a Cockney accent.
Mm,
And so you know exactly where they're from. And then you have some that grew up in other places, and you know where they're from because it's just completely different. I think it's less of an expression of social class comparatively, because obviously Cockney and Standard British is an expression of what people perceive to be social class. But in our case, it's less of a social class and more of a cultural heritage
mm.
in the way that you speak. We have the Mennonites in Andros, and they have their own dialect as well. And so you get an appreciation for the history of a place. There are some words that only some settlements say, and it's almost like it's a password, a hidden thing for you to be able to express those things. And just being able to see that really reminds us that we have common threads that bind us together, but we also have a different hue of thread that makes that unique.
Mm, yeah. So you know where somebody's from. If they say one word or two words, you're like, "Oh, you're from here, you're from there."
Oh yeah, Bolo is a Long Island word.
Mhm.
Big Brother, Long Island, straight up Long Island. Okay. And that's just one example out of the many. Like I can't even name them because I'm still learning them.
Mm.
And I'm still learning the origin of many of them. So yeah, but Bola, Long Island.
Have you noticed or heard of any people who protest using this Creole openly, proudly, loudly? Is there a faction of people who still want to speak properly?
So, and it's the notion of speaking properly is something that culturally we, especially those of us born in the late 70s and early 80s, and now the 90s, are actually pushing back against.
Yeah.
And I would say that it's because there is a bit of, I want to say this the right way, there is a bit of classism involved in the discouragement of young people from learning and speaking a language that is a language. There is a level of erasure in saying that standard English is proper, it is right, as opposed to a language that is also proper and right. And so, even with the curriculum of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the language arts curriculum, we are encouraged to teach students both, but how to use them in the proper context.
Mm.
And so, for formal writing, obviously, you would want to use your British English, depending on the purpose of the writing. And also because the using of the standard English is a way to just ensure that there is a communication that can be understood easily across cultural divides. And then there is also the encouragement of the cultural heritage and preservation of Bahamian Creole as formerly spoken of as Bahamian dialect. Because with that, again, you have the history of communities, you have the history of people, you have the history of food, you have the history of cultural traditions and social practices and norms. And
Mm.
then you also have this pride in who you are as a Bahamian based on the way that you speak, based on the things that you say, based on the expressions, and based on how that's presented. We very rarely, when we get on an international space or in an international space, discourage anybody who speaks British English or the American English, or they speak any other international language. We don't sit there and we don't ridicule them or feel as though they're less intelligent because they speak their languages. And so we as Bahamians should not be made to feel inferior by discouraging the use of our dialect in professional spaces as well. It's just how it is used and the purpose for which it is used.
Mm.
And I think in the past, we were robbed of that understanding of the context in which it is used and the audience for which it is used. And so, because we didn't appreciate context, we just
Mm.
said, oh, no, you sound dumb. Throw that away. Put
Right.
that aside. We don't want y'all to sound dumb when you go around big company. We want y'all to sound like y'all have sense, like y'all are educated. And I just be like, well, I educated and they could still understand what I say. And I just need to slow it down a little bit so they can understand what I say. But they get the message. And you see, I did a lot just now. But I find that that comes across extremely well when I want to emphasize a point.
Hmm.
I can tell you what a carcinofluorocarbon is in my Bahamian dialect or my Bahamian Creole, and you still can get the message.
Yeah.
Stop with CFCs.
That is so important. I love that people are coming around to understanding that it's okay to use
Yeah.
your language. It doesn't make you dumb. It doesn't mean you're uneducated or that you don't care about education. It's a language and there
Yeah.
are rules of usage, and juxtaposing it with proper or thinking that it's improper is a thing of the past, and I'm glad that we're pushing it out of our collective consciousness.
The way that I do it is I incorporate it into my music a whole lot. So a lot of when I sing, depending on what it's for, uses Bahamian dialect. For example, Juicy Fruit is a play on the Maureen Duvalier Don't Touch Me Tomato, her rendition of Don't Touch Me Tomato. And of course, it is also just paying homage to some of our musical greats. And so I say, every time you come around, you're looking for something to try, always browsing my samples. But when you go by, green mango and season, you're squeezing the fruit, the riper the berry, the sweeter the juice. And what ends up happening is you have a whole lot of Bahamian adages and you have a number of metaphors that are Bahamian or that are Caribbean or that are African that are communicated through the music, through the use of the dialect that tell a really important message that is multifold. And people tend to get it because music kind of transcends all languages. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
People get mood, they get messaging, and they have a sense of connectivity through the music. And being able to use that as a way of preserving culture, but also teaching language is something that's always been incredibly important to me.
Yeah. How have you noticed in music? I'm jumping ahead, I know, but in musically, you have your influences, your Bahamian musical influences, and you're writing and you're singing now. How have you noticed the language and that communication and what we're referencing
Mm.
in the lyrics? How has that changed over time?
Okay, so now I'm going to put in my radio broadcasting background. When I started radio, I think it was in 2003. I was in completing my second year of college or beginning my third year of college. I was hired by Island FM and Carter Marketing as a radio host and a technical producer. What ended up happening is under the tutelage of Sir Charles Carter, he wasn't, of course, Sir Charles Carter at the time. He he taught me quite a bit about radio. At that time, there were certain words that you could not say. For example, I didn't know that Priscilla Rollins was the originator of the term Bunji Garlin. You know why? Because the radio couldn't play the word bungi, which is a Bahamian word, is a Geechee word, bunki.
Mhm.
Bungi is the Bahamian version of it. The Geechee version is bunki. We couldn't play that on the radio. So certain words you could not say on the radio because they were seen as crass or inappropriate because obviously, that you're referring to the posterior of a woman, however it is that you want to refer to it.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't until I performed maybe about 4 years ago, maybe five, at a Bahamian tattoo service for independence that I heard the non-radio edit. Is the boongie rolling? Yes, ma'am. Is it rolling steady? Yes, ma'am. Are the boys them watching? Yes, ma'am. I had to hear it live. Now, by Priscilla Rollins when she sang Got a Letter from Miami. Now we can say more of the Bahamian words. So you can say bungie on the radio. Um, we have more rappers using Bahamian dialect, new Bahamian words in their hip hop. And additionally, more of the rappers are rapping in their Bahamian Creole intentionally, the
Mhm.
same way that a Jamaican would, you know, rap or they would chant or chat or perform reggae music in their own way of speaking, their own Jamaican Creole, their own Jamaican dialect, of course, depending on which communities they're from. And so it's now a case where you can automatically say that's a Bahamian song, not because the quality is poor, but because of the way that the song is written and because of the way that the lines are delivered, because of the content of the writing. And also now the music videos, they hide, they lit, they look good with a T, G-O-D-T.
I wanna know, if you didn't hear bunkie on the radio, what were they replacing that word with?
So
Or was it just bleeped out? Like, what how did
no,
okay.
no, you couldn't even, the thing is, if you even wrote it,
Mm.
then it wouldn't be played. And so, fun fact, the biggest box in the world is not about a box coming in on a plane. That's KB. She had the biggest box in the world I ever saw. With all she got, who could ask for more? That ain't about a box. I didn't learn that until I was an adult. So, Bahamians are excellent at analogies, metaphors, and we are also excellent at the entendre. And so we found creative ways to say certain things that you couldn't say in public. The same way that you found enslaved people found creative ways to mock their masters.
Mm.
They found creative ways to create costumes. They found creative ways to speak in a way that they can enjoy their conversations publicly, but privately. Because you don't know what we're saying, but we talking about you.
Mm.
Yeah. You think you know what we're saying, but we talking about you. Because we're speaking in metaphors, but we're talking about you.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah,
had be.
we know. We don't have to
Yeah.
point, we don't have to say a word.
You pick up if you do the eye. Oh, hold on, let me check. Because it's also unspoken languages. Watch the eyes. Mhm. Everybody knows with those eye movements. Me and it's a subtle turn of the head. It's mhm. And each one of those are different, but I know you know exactly what I meant
We
with
just
each
had
one
a
of
whole
those.
conversation.
An entire conversation. Not one verbal word spoken. Oh,
Oh,
wow.
man. I love us.
White people are
Listen,
really shady. They don't know. Oh, you're really shady.
do we have any of these linguistic or Creole related changes when it comes to something like Junkanoo?
And so I think Junkanoo is the penultimate expression of it, to be honest. It is a place where you get those freedom chants. You get that kind of ring play action. You get that community love and respect because each Junkanoo group has their own language as well. And I try to, I'm not a Junkanooer or like Angelique McKay would say, a Junkanoo. I still don't understand how they get a Junkanoo because I would think a Junkanooer would be like the word, but they use Junkanoo as a noun. And see now, see, it's a noun for the parade. It's a noun that means a person who participates in Junkanoo. I don't understand how we got there linguistically. However, that's what they say. I would say you are a Junkanooer.
Okay.
But they would tell me that's incorrect grammatically. And I am like, okay, I don't belong. I don't be in the shack shooting with y'all in the shack. I don't be there with the glue gun. So what you tell me, that's what it is.
Mhm.
You ain't cuss me because I want to tell you what you is, but you would tell me use a junkanoo. Mm-mm.
Okay.
You never heard that. But each one of those shacks, they have their own language. They have their own sayings. They have their own calls. They have their calls and response. And so when you are there, and let's say you from Mason Edition, so you are hardcore Saxon, or you from the Valley, it's the history of those communities in one space. It is the contributions to society of those religious people, the non-religious people, the creative people, the professional people, the white collar people, the blue collar people, and your Grammy
Right.
and her, all in those community shacks. And so they have their own things that they say, they have their own languages. And I love the fact that we're in a place where we not only respect them, but we value them. We value them so much that when you hear those names, even with some of the upstart groups like Genesis, you appreciate them because of what they represent for the communities they're a part of.
Mhm. I realized that I asked you about Junkanoo and we didn't define it for the listening audience. I asked you because I'm curious and I know what it is, but can you please tell our audience about the splendor of Junkanoo?
So I'm going to give you a working definition for the purposes of this conversation. So Junkanoo is the largest cultural expression of the Bahamas. As a cultural expression, the largest display of this is a parade that takes place on Boxing Day, which is the day after Christmas, and then again on New Year's Day. It originates from a parade that took place from enslaved peoples who were given that day after the day after Christmas as an off day. So they took it so that they would be able to use the extra boxes or whatever supplies that they have and integrate that into the John Canoe festival that we celebrated around the same time of the year. And so to mark the former slave masters and as a sign of freedom, they would paint their faces and they would dress up in, let's say, the whatever they could find. So that would be cloth straps, cloth scraps. They would have like coconut fronds. They would have whatever was available, and they would take whichever musical instruments they had, or they could create like the cowbells, the goatskin drums. You would take the poinciana maracas, the poinciana seed pods for the maracas is that you made out of them. And they would organize themselves into groups and create music and just dance and make their chants as they went through the streets. Um, Over time, it's progressed into the use of newspapers and paper mache, colorful paints. And now we have like really, really ornate displays using crepe paper, colorful crepe paper, what you call shiny objects and tricks and sequins. And now we have like 3D and 4D displays with new instruments called the kunkalakas. And if you come at the end of the year, then you're in for a treat because the whole season really and truly is focused along the Junkanoo Festival here in the Bahamas. But if you come during the summer, we have the Junkanoo Summer Festival. All of our big events, national celebrations feature Junkanoo groups and that expression simply because we say we out here, we outside, this us here. Yeah, making plenty noise.
I encourage everyone listening to, at some point in their life, to witness Junkanoo because
Yeah.
it's absolutely beautiful. And if you can't get there and you want to see it, you can watch it on YouTube, like I did last year. And it was big. It was huge. I was like, wow. I
Mm-hmm.
was really, really impressed, and everyone does such a beautiful job. Thank you for sharing that. So you were a teacher, and when you were in the classroom, when you had your students, or maybe young people who were mentored by you, what was their first of all, how did you empower them to use their Creole in this educational space that you were in?
So I taught religious studies, which is a social science. And I never stopped using my Bahamian Creole. I didn't see a reason to. I didn't see the necessity to completely strip that from whatever it is that I wanted to express. And it's simply because children need to see themselves in the adults that are mentoring them. And so using the Bahamian Creole gave them an opportunity to feel comfortable in their expressions. And then when I needed to have them formally write something, I would say, okay, so we say it this way in Bahamian Creole, but this is the way that I need you to write it. And so you give them both because then it allows them to code switch between the two languages as necessary. And it's simply because the requirement is that they should write it in standard English, even though they can express it in Bahamian Creole. And so what it does is it allowed them to engage in the conversation more without feeling like they're always being corrected for saying something bad or speaking badly or speaking bad English, as we were taught, like literally, we were taught that it's bad English.
Mhm.
And so reframing that allowed children to build self-esteem to speak during classes, to ask questions without feeling judged, to engage in conversations that were important, to feel as though they were included in the conversations. And then also having the freedom to know that they weren't dumb.
Mm.
I I think that's for me, that's the most important thing. Reframing this perception that speaking the language of your parents, your grandparents, your ancestors makes you dumb. Because that's a very, very antiquated colonial mindset that, we have been working to re-educate even some of our 40 and 50-year-olds, some of our 70-year-olds about.
Are there things that we say, but the way that we relate with one another
Yeah.
in terms of community, like how is that expressed?
So we have the concept of being your brother's keeper,
Mm.
for example, which is also incredibly African. It's you have the concept of the village. In Christianity, we call it being your brother's keeper. We call it looking out for communities. We look at the way that the early church looked out for the widows. They looked out for the homeless. They looked out for the orphaned children. They pooled resources, and we see that in the communities that we serve. We see that in the sororities that are here and fraternities, Black Greek letter organizations to be specific in the Bahamas. We see that in the work of the Masons, the Freemasonry that's there. And we kind of connect all of them to religion as well as to the fight for equality and the fight against racism, because they're all tied into that community activism. So it's the
Mm.
church, Black Greek led organizations, masons. And a lot of people would think that they don't go together, but historically, the importance of those organizations lend to the development of communities that are seen as underprivileged. And liquor stores on Sunday cannot open out of reverence and respect unless you go to a restaurant, which they can serve liquor. I've also mentioned that some of our heads of agreements require that there's a community service element that you include if you're going to establish an international company in certain parts of the Bahamas. And so you have to get back to education, which is kind of the concept of tithing. But instead of it going to God, it's going to the community. And so we see the reason for that. You can't just take and take from Bahamians and not give back to the communities that are putting monies in your pocket. We see that in a lot of the corporate entities that are here, locally owned businesses that established their presence in different communities. And so I would say that in the establishment of the ethical indication of giving back to the community, I'm not just taking. That's important. In the moral value of assisting the less fortunate and providing services for them, we see that as an offshoot of Christianity. And let me just also say, there is the argument that you can get these values from other religions, which is a very true statement.
Mhm.
However, in the Bahamas, Christianity is the foundation of that.
Mhm. I want to talk about your music. Now, like I said, you are an icon and you've done so much. So, how did you get into music and how did you develop your musical style and your musical expression? Tell us all about that.
Okay, so this is a long story. So I'm gonna abridge it just a tiny bit. I grew up in a house where my mom played Mahalia Jackson and she played a Michael Jackson. She played the Temptations and that type of music during the year. And when she's feeling really, really like truly Bahamian, between her records and then her cassette tapes and her VHS tapes and, now her CDs. She played Priscilla Rollins, Independence Morning, on a Independence Day. She would play Fishing in on the Rocks. And so I had a very, very intentional grasp on Bahamian music since I was small. It's because I was exposed to it. So I ended up going to Kingsway Academy. I was able to hone my craft in poetry writing and creative writing at Kingsway Academy because we had competitions, literary competitions, poetry competitions that we were encouraged to participate in. And then my music teacher, God rest her soul, is Miss Cornelia Lightbourne. And so I got involved. She used to tutor me in keyboard. And I still play piano now. Not that she didn't try, but it's just that I didn't fall in love with playing an instrument. It's too much coordination. Things might be. Don't remember. I just prefer to write.
Mhm.
Exactly right. And so from there, I entered Cindy Thompson's Miss Talented Teen. The first time I sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow was pretty cool, but and the
Mm.
second time I did a poem, because I did it twice. I did a poem called Mr. Politician, which was an expression of the confusion young people were having about the 2005 CARICOM single market and economy, political issues at the time. And I ended up winning the talent competition part because it was delivered in jazz, it was poetry, I acted it out. I had all types of manipulatives, like props on the stage. I was dressed in my school uniform. And as somebody that was going to be 18 at the time that I was graduated, I pulled out my mock voter's card. And the last line was, I'm registered to vote. Okay. And I got a standing ovation, won the competition. Pew, 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 pew. Okay. The competition went away to Starbucks International Pageant, wrote something else. I rapped, won that part of the competition. And then by the time I graduated I skipped something. I went to LW Young when I was in grade 9 to sit BJCs. I had my very first radio single when I was 14, and my first writing credit when I was 14, because I wrote on our album Eagles something for the new millennium, because it was 1997. And so we recorded a whole album at Commonwealth Recording Studios with Dylan McKenzie. He's now known as D-Mac.
Mm.
So from there, I did the pageant. And after I graduated high school, being a part of my church, we did talent competitions. And everywhere our pastor went to sing, as part of the vocal ensemble, I went there to sing. This is supposed to be the abridged version, but y'all can get it. We sang nationally. Then we went off to this competition that never saw the light of day. It was a reality competition called Gospel Dreams with Creflo Dollar. And we placed second as a gospel group. My best friend and I ended up being signed to Dunamis Sounds. And then my third and fourth recorded singles were gospel. They were gospel hip hop, gospel poetry. And so it's still on one of Manifest Parks' albums. From there, I was signed, well, we got dropped, but I always knew that I wasn't supposed to be in a gospel, like a gospel artist. I knew that.
Yeah.
Love me some gospel music, but I also knew that I'm not a gospel artist.
Mhm.
So went there, started doing reggae. I signed with Buffalo Records. I ended up with the record-breaking single called One, I Love You on the Copycat rhythm. That rhythm hit all of the DJ pools, all around the world. And so that was my first foray into the international market. And then I just kept dropping like reggae hits from then. Linked up with Lincoln Ward, who was from the British Virgin Islands, and we recorded Intoxicated on the One Night rhythm. And that did extremely well. Dropped a few music videos on Temple Television, but the biggest record that I had up until 2009 was Intoxicated, the O2 Junkanoo Refix.
Mm.
I spent over $10,000 at the time for a music video for that, shot by, I'm trying to remember his name, Julian Lord,
Mhm.
who had like, he was shooting in 8K because he used to shoot for CNN and CBS and all of these international companies. Like Julian Lord shot that video for me. That music video included Trinidadian Carnival, but it also, I got Angelique McKay and a few others to make me some Junkanoo costumes. So we pasted the costumes. There was a picture of Maureen Duvalier and Eloise Lewis that they were at the Drum Beat Club that I used as the inspiration for my very first costume, which was a straw. It had a straw band, and then it had androsia fabric, and then I made a straw bra. I created that. That was me from
Wow.
start to finish. And so I used it as an opportunity to pay homage to these women, African traditions, my love song on the beach during a bonfire in carnival
Mm.
inspired costumes that were pasted in the genre that we call soca, which is soca and jamcanoe.
Oh.
And yeah, that kind of catapulted my career on the Temple Television. It made me a household name in addition to my other reggae songs. And then I made up my mind that in 2015, when we did Junkanoo Carnival, I would reinvigorate my career. And I participated in that, placed fourth, and I have been going ever since. You know, my producer's Rick Carey. We did All Day, All Night, placed fourth. We did Good Feelings. Good Feelings was featured as one of the songs played at the halftime show for the Miami Heat and the New Orleans Pelicans. And Pelicans simply because that's what Buddy was. So, you know, where Buddy Hield was, the Bahamians is shout out Buddy. And, you know, I've written a number of songs nationwide, a number of jingles, and I've had maybe like 3 or 4 songs so far that have been used as campaign songs for Collect, the National Bank of the Bahamas. The Bahamas Telecommunications Company regionally, they use My Rock and My Combo for their promotion. So they licensed the song for that use. And Fabulous Living Bahamian Style, I wrote the jingle for that. I worked for the Bahamas Ministry of Agriculture. Yeah, I be outside. I do that.
See, that's tremendous, Bodine.
Thank you.
That's tremendous. That is really so exciting. And being a child of the Bahamas, a woman of the Bahamas, you understand your culture, you understand your language, you understand your history.
I would like for the work to speak for itself, but also for the impact. I measure my efficacy in impact. Are children singing the songs? Do they know who Eloise Lewis is? Do they know who Bess Hepburn is? Do they know who Joseph Spence is? Have I gotten them to ring play? Have I made women feel comfortable in their skins? Have I been able to have them recite the affirmations, sugar in a plum in the mirror and feel empowered? Because I don't care about recognition. I care about the impact of it. I gotta say this. I have this line. I'm gonna see if I could shorten it. I have this line that I tend to leave with people during speaking engagements when I go to schools or I speak to women or youth or young people. And it's inspired by the late Miles Monroe, who was more like die empty because the richest place on earth is the grave, right? It's a concept that he has. And the first part of it goes, in the end, all that matters is I leave nothing for the grave to prize. On the brink of forever, not my demise. I soar, too many are content just to fly. Nebulas of possibilities, no stars in my eyes. I keep doing it till my best is better. The only sin in life is if I never move this kinetic from potential and make shoulda, woulda, coulda the place where I pitch my residential. I need to give you the whole verse. Mom and dad spoke success before I began to exist. God put a purpose in my heart and a pen in my fist, and I will dream and inspire until my last respire, till the words turn to phoenix and from embers flame the fire. I am more than just a body, more than just a breath. My life is to bring encouragement and inspiration to the next. And so some don't know and others can't see. I know clearly my life isn't all about me. That's me.
That I love it. I
Thank you.
needed to hear that, and I'm sure that's gonna resonate with a number of listeners of this show. That's very powerful, and you just off the top of your head,
Yeah.
an icon. Like I said, you're amazing. You're fantastic. So shall we talk about food?
Yeah.
So I want to let the audience know how I found you, and it's through your YouTube page where you share and cook Bahamian recipes. Now, I, a child of the diaspora, did not grow up cooking Bahamian food. I grew up eating it with my grandmother and my great grandmother, but my mother did not cook us Bahamian food. I'm sorry, mom. She might not want the whole world to know that, but I didn't grow up cooking it. So when I when I got older and I'm wanting to reconnect with my roots and reconnect in different ways, I'm looking for recipes that I can make. I have a little tiny cookbook that I bought at the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas. So that was my first step. And then I found your channel and I love the way that you cook. I love how you make recipes so accessible. You make them healthy. You make us feel confident to experiment and make the dishes in our own way. And I think that it's so important that you have this Bahamian food specific channel and you're putting that out into the world for people like me or people who maybe have never been to the Bahamas or only been there as tourists and
Mhm.
they want to have a closer connection with the food. So tell us a bit about how you have this love of food, how you got started with cooking on YouTube, and a little bit more about BodinePot.
I appreciate you for saying it the way it's supposed to be said. It is Bodine pot, not Bodine's pot, because it's Bahamian Creole. It's my pot. But I got into cooking because my dad cooks extremely well. He doesn't cook often, but he cooks extremely well. My Grammy is a cook. Every Saturday, my aunts were in the kitchen in Pinedale, and they would sell plates on a Saturday. And so a tradition in our house is that we don't cook on Saturdays because Grammy cooks. So
Mm.
we would support her by purchasing plates of food, but I was also there on Saturday to witness their recipes. And as a very little girl, they would only let me help cut up things. But I pretty much spent a lot of the time just manning the little shop that my Grammy had in the front of her yard. 'Cause she sold like tomatoes and onions and all stuff
Mhm.
and dry. And my mom cooks. She's from Exuma. And so she did the majority of the cooking. The way that my mom cooks and the way that I cook are two completely different type of cooking because she cooks from that like 1950s, 1970s kind of thing.
Huh.
It's full fat, right? And I'm like, well, I can't do the full fat thing. It's like it too early. Can't do it. And by early I mean oily. Okay. And she says onions. She doesn't say onion.
Oh boy.
Onion. That's a
Uh-huh.
very deep thing, right? Either which way, during the pandemic, what ended up happening is I was home and I honestly didn't know how to bake bread. And so we ended up looking through people's suggestions on Facebook on how to bake bread, right? And some of their recipes on like they had a pound of this and a quart. Like I was like, because that's a British thing. That's a British thing. And Bahamians, traditionally, we don't write down measurements for recipes. And so it made it kind of difficult for you to kind of gauge how much of this and how much of that and whether you did something right or wrong. And they didn't have any visual representations of it. As an educator, I'm like, okay, I need to try this. And I like to experiment. So there's that. And so one of those days I learned how to kind of bake bread. And then I tried, something because it came out hard. Then I tried something a bit different. What ended up happening is when I got it to some semblance of correctness that was consistent enough, I decided to record it, even though this was not the first recipe, but it's one of the ones that is harder for people. And I made it. I wrote down, the measurements. I gave people the amount of time and people just found it therapeutic. In a world where we like to condense our content to a minute 30, maybe even 5 minutes, I found that my audience appreciated the pace that I went at with cooking, that they appreciated that you can see everything just out and chopped, and they appreciated the fact that I could walk them through the process and explain why you can't have the oil or the fire all the way up in the air if you're trying to fry something or deep fry something, simply because it'll be burned on the outside, but it wouldn't be done on the inside. And I didn't know that grits didn't have to plop you when you cook it. I didn't know that because think about it, in a Bahamian kitchen, when you're cooking grits, the grits used to be flying up inside the air, trying to, you used to be trying to keep the cover on top of the. I didn't know that you could turn the stove down,
Mhm.
turn it down, turn it down, and cover it with a cover and let the grits soak properly. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to kind of share my discoveries with people, but it's also a way of me showing love. Like I love to cook. It's a way of showing affection.
Mhm.
And so with people who are from the diaspora, who live abroad, who may not have access to all of the Bahamian ingredients, being able to provide them with substitutions and a way to make the food healthier, because we don't live on farms anymore where you have to have a million children and you have to feed them all of the fat so that it doesn't waste and they have energy to work all day.
Yeah.
You learn that you don't have to leave all of the fat in the food for one dish. You can save that fat and then use it in another dish at a different time.
Mhm.
Um, you can slow cook your meat and infuse flavor in it and then use one portion today and another portion tomorrow, which is a lot more energy efficient. And it's a good way to manage your budget.
Right.
And you can cook smaller portions and you know what portions give you what kind of nutrients of Bahamian food that if you're on a diet, you don't have to throw out of the window simply because you want to meet macros or whatever the case may be. And so it dispels the notion that healthy food cannot be cultural food. Shout out to the Eat Well Exchange, by the way. They're doing great work. And in addition to that, it's now that we have persons in that agricultural space, the orange economy space, that are producing and manufacturing agricultural products like conch broth from Finder Roots in Grand Bahama. You can come here, you can get a case of conch broth as somebody that lives in New York. You can freeze it, you can put it in a cooler bag, and you can ship it to New York along with your frozen conch, and you can store that in your freezer. And when you want to make conch fritters, when you want to make stew conch, when you want conch flavored rice, now you can have that in a shelf stable form, and I can teach you how to use it to make Bahamian food.
Mhm.
And so the tastes of the Bahamas are no longer inaccessible to you simply because we've gotten to the place where we can export these products and you can have them and you can feel like you're connected to the food that your Grammy, your great Grammy, your aunt, your uncle could make while you're away from home, even if you can't make it home. And for me, that's important because it's an important preservation of Bahamian culture. It's an important preservation of the relationships that we have with one another, the ties that bind. It is important because you can see yourself in the food that you eat. You can share that and your heritage with other people, and you can feel like you accomplished something.
Mm.
And that I want to build self-esteem for culture. So for culture and for community. So when people tell me, girl, I didn't know I didn't have to boil my conch before I make stew. Yeah, girl, don't do that. It can be hard. The conch can be hard. Oh, I didn't have to fry my conch out if I want to make conch and rice. I say, yeah, you don't got to fry it out because it could be chewy. It's nothing worse than chewy conch. Conch's supposed to melt in your mouth. You need to make the rice and then, kind of steam it, unless, of course, it's frozen conch. Depends. But the long and short of it is community is food. Community is language. Food is a language of love. And as somebody that absolutely loves my culture, being able to tell stories while I'm cooking the way that your Grammy and your aunties then used to talk. And I have people that still use those old videos on a Sunday morning when they getting ready to cook their stew fish. They cooking with me at all 20 something minutes. And I love that. I love that. They stay with me on YouTube. They send me screenshots and it just makes me so happy. I call my show BodinePot because it's the way that I cook it. I
Mhm.
only want to show you how to do it because when you cook it, it'll be L pot.
Mm.
That's your pot, Sharice pot, whoever pot.
It's a good.
When people come in the comments and they want to talk about, oh, you should do it this way, baby, that's your pot. Do what you're doing. Do what you're
Yeah.
doing. Leave my pot alone. You could have
Mind your own pot.
please. Because, in the Bahamas, we love to tell people how to do things. But I can say, even if you have all of the exact ingredients that I have, and I cook it the way that I cook it, and you cook it the way that you cook it, following the same recipe, it could taste different. You know why? Because each of us, okay, so here's another Bahamian thing. My hand different from your hand. What that means is you have a unique way of cooking. My mommy could have the fat that she used from two different pots. And I could use my mommy fat and do exactly what it is that she do. And my food still wouldn't taste like her because her hand different for her pot.
I want to come back to what I wrote earlier when you said crack conch is Greek.
Hmm. So in our melting pot of Bahamian communities,
Mhm.
I did not know when I started to learn about the origins of Bahamian food that crack conch actually has Greek origins. And when you think about it, it makes sense because calamari ain't a Bahamian thing. Calamari is a very Greek. Ah, ah, yeah, yeah. When you think about it, it makes sense because when you think about the way that they prepare calamari, conch has a similar texture, completely different taste, but similar texture. And so if you tenderize the conch because it's just so thick, and then you season it and flour it, and then you deep fry it, treat it the same way you treat calamari, you understand the connection. The conch salad itself is a ceviche, plenty lime, plenty.
Mhm.
Then you have your grilled conch. And Chef Simeon Hall, I think, is the most renowned food historian, currently in the Bahamas. And I say renowned because he has intentionally made it clear that his mission is to preserve food culture, to be a griot of types when it comes down to the origin of food. He's currently working on a book. I've had the pleasure of working along with him on a number of occasions. And his branding focuses on the story of the Bahamian food experience.
What are some favorites of yours, cuisine wise? And let me just say, let me ask you this question. Don't curse me. Don't cuss
Hmm.
me, as we'd say. But maybe there is no answer to this. We know, and my listeners may not know, you and I know, that conch is queen in the Bahamas. And there's so many ways to cook it, so many ways to prepare it and eat it. Do you have a favorite preparation?
I can get wrong. Plenty people love traditional conch salad.
Hmm.
I love a tropical conch salad.
With
I just
the,
Mhm.
hmm it's good.
With the pineapple.
Hmm.
Like I like mine with the fruit in it. But for some strange reason, tropical conch salad is the thing for me. So for those of you who are into like the traditional, I taking nothing away from you. I can appreciate a traditional, but my deli say the tropical because it's sweet. It's sweet. It's spicy. It's limey. It's a pleasure to eat, and I think that fruit is the perfect complement to our conch. After that, I would say an old fashioned scotch, which is when you tenderize the conch and then you cut it. You cut it so that it looks like a bunch of little mini squares, which is a way to tenderize it. You serve it with sour orange, lime, salt, and gold pepper or bird pepper as a sauce. And you just let it sit there and marinate, and then you eat it. And it's served by the conch horn, which is the little nail, the little brown nail. Yeah, they serve it as one piece. Love that. But after that, my Bahamian meal, funny story, I do not like, I wouldn't order stew conch.
Mm.
You take me anywhere, I wouldn't order stew conch. But baby, stew me a grouper,
Mm.
don't bread it. Fry, like lightly fry it in some butter, and then take that oil and some grouper broth and make me a stew grouper. Wow. And it have to be dark. Like the flour have to be dark. Don't give me no white stew, because that's a chowder. Yeah. He- What y'all doing? That's not stew. The flour ain't cook. You gotta toast the flour until it brown, not light brown either. It gotta be like almost milk chocolate brown.
Yeah. It's got to
Yeah,
be a
milk
dark
chocolate.
brew.
Yeah. So y'all stop playing around on the board. We all play. I ain't gonna tell you what to do with your pot, but don't do that.
How about a Bahamian dessert that you enjoy?
Now, funny story. I am the coconut goddess. But if I had to choose between a coconut tart and a pineapple tart, baby, it's a pineapple tart every day.
Okay.
It's a pineapple tart. And if it's the old fashioned one, if it's the old fashioned crust, then it can't be super sweet. It have because the pineapple already sweet. One sugarloaf pineapple tart, yeah, that's me. But the
Okay.
coconut one,
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, I like coconut, but I love me a pineapple. I think y'all should be noticing the trend here.
Pineapple. And that pineapple is very Bahamian. So you're on brand for you're on brand for
But
that.
not for the coconut goddess.
Not for the coconut goddess. Pineapple goddess doesn't have the same ring to it.
It really doesn't. But the coconut goddess really and truly just speaks to the versatility of the coconut plant. And so I have taken it as my personal symbol. I am the coconut.
As we've heard through this episode, you are multi-talented and you are multifaceted. You're very versatile and you are, again, an icon. I would love for you to let our audience know where we can find you, where we can hear your music, where we can see you out and about or hear you on the radio or anything like that.
So I can be found on YouTube, on all social media. Every one of my social media is Bodine Victoria, no spaces. My website is BodineVictoria.com. And that's how you find me. My most active platform is Instagram. After that, it is Facebook. And then I update the tickety talk on occasion. So, but I'm there. And my music is on all streaming platforms. Definitely go and follow my Instagram. I upload all of my movements very, very often. And my stories are particularly active. And so if that's how you want to connect with me, my DMs are always open. I may not be able to answer in 24 hours, but I answer them all when I have the opportunity to catch up because it's very important to me.
Yeah, fantastic. I will add all of those links to the show notes for this episode so that people who are listening can click and get in touch with you and follow you and listen to you right away. Thank you so much for this conversation. This has filled my heart.
Yay. That's what we want. Exactly what we want. And I truly appreciate you just reaching out to me to ask me, about my experience with Bahamian culture because it's different and it's unique for each person. And as the coconut goddess, I often give people the parable of the coconut, which is something that I wrote when I was writing Sugar in a Plum. And the coconut is an example of the versatility of giving back to community, how important it is for one person to just use every aspect of themselves. And so from the coconut, you have coconut water, you have coconut jelly, you have grated coconut, you have coconut bar. Some people use it for fashion. Some people use it as a way to keep themselves warm. They use it to light fires. You use the coconut tree as a shade, so birds are safe there. The coconut tree, it buffets the hurricane winds and it allows your home to not take on the full impact of any storms that may be coming its way. The water is often used in emergency situations to rehydrate. It's healthy. And you have coconuts and their products as an opportunity to develop industry in a number of places with the number of products that can be made. And so when you think about the coconut doesn't exist for itself. It
Mm,
exists for community and it is a part of Bahamian culture. So everything we do is for culture, for community.
that's lovely. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
I want to end on a fun note.
Oh,
Just my last question that I ask all of my guests. And this is an opportunity for listeners and myself to learn some language, some Bahamian Creole. Do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Bahamian Creole to share and to teach us?
so I'm going to go with the saying that I use to close off BodinePot.
Okay.
It's called "Don't let any and everybody dig up in your pot." It is a double entendre, but I'll teach you the first one because the other one you can use your imagination for, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Don't let any and everybody dig up in your pot is something that I got from my father. He never used to let, when he was cooking, he didn't like a bunch of people to put their spoon in his pot. So what you ain't gonna do is mess with his pot. And so what it is protecting something that's important to you from people meddling or people spoiling it. It's also protecting yourself from being taken advantage of by people who are only concerned about what you have to offer. And then as a young woman, it is also about maintaining or being selective with who has access to you and your resources. Uh-huh. Very politically correct answer the last one.
Don't let everybody
Dig up in your
dig up
pot.
dig up in your pot. Words to live by. Words. We're all adults. We all understand both meanings of that. So thank you for imparting that. Thank you for sharing that with us. Bodine, this has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and get to hear your story and learn about your perspective. Before I let you go, in the Bahamas, you've been talking to someone for quite some time and you're enjoying the conversation, but it's time for you to go your separate ways. In Bahamian Creole, what is the best way to say goodbye?
Oh, later. I can talk to you later.
I could talk to you
Oh,
later.
yeah. Or because I don't tell people bye because bye is permanent, right? But we also have a song that I heard Patricia Roberts sing. And it's a song that was a woo Negro spiritual or a Negro hymn or whatever it is that we call it. Lay down, my dear sister, lay down and take your rest and place your on the Savior's breast. Cause I love you, good Lordy, but Jesus love you the best. I bid you good night, good night, good night. Oh, and then you repeat it. So that's if you're telling people bye for the last time. So I can see you later, okay?
I can see you later.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation, and I'll be talking to you soon.